Om Mantranam Jivabhuta Tulya Smrita Shakti Rupaya Tatahina Vararohe Nishvalaha Sharda Bravat. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. She, that one whom the seers remember and know as the imperishable Shakti, is the meaning in all the slokas and sutras of the holy scriptures of the different religions. Without her, O fair one, all the tattvas, like objects, senses, would be like clouds with no rain. She is the perfect I consciousness, existing in all the multitude of words. And the secret of all the mantras, whose very being is the essence of non-duality. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with the world, with the teachings, or with what we study. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. This is the first class in our series of classes on the subject of Kundalini Yoga as Mahayoga. And of course we are approaching the Divine Mother season called Navaratri, which happens usually toward the end of September or into October. And we will be actually at our mainland centers for that, doing our full Durga Puja, which is a 2.5 to 3 hour affair that we conduct once a year with all the trimmings, 10, 12 or 16 article worship to this most rare and inscrutable deity probably in the entire pantheon, called Divine Mother, or the universal goddess, Kali, Durga, Tara, Saraswati, Lakshmi, and others. She has so many names and forms and still manages to retain her innate unity and divinity throughout, and also on whatever level she happens to appear. She's appearing to us as the chant I just quoted and recited out of the Tantra Shastra sadhanas. So, she's appearing as intelligence, and so she's very difficult to detect. Movements are most subtle. And even when she is moving in not so subtle a way, people still tend to overlook this divine power. And so there is one system in India that, at least, that's very specific about her worship and falls along the line of the sloka I just chanted, that says that the seers from lifetime to lifetime, they keep her in mind, they come to know her, and they remember her as the divine and imperishable Shakti, the perfect I consciousness in all words. So she's that sense of highest non-duality, at the same time can appear as a personal goddess or deity, and does so fluidly, as if unnoticeably. And many great seers, even contemporary times, I remember Sri Aurobindo writing about Divine Mother Reality and saying how mercurial and swift her movements are, faster than anyone can detect, even the realized souls. So spontaneity, immediacy, immanence, prominence, all of those things come to mind when the mind pauses a while to try and detect her. So some of this, in my experience over my 50 years of sadhana, in a mother path, you might say the path of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa is a universal path and blends all the darshanas, which is actually the title called Mahayoga. But don't want to get ahead of myself there. But if you look more specifically at the Ramakrishna path, and you wanted to understand what it consists of, basically, you would say the path of worship of Divine Mother and Advaita Vedanta. And we're very fortunate that Swami Vivekananda brought the Vedanta and the Advaita Vedanta to us in late 1800s at the Parliament of Religions, sort of as a showcase for the whole country to have access to it when it was ready. But behind that was, may she, the primal guide, my refuge be. She always had this Divine Mother power behind him and always acknowledged that, which was a kind of unique thing for somebody who was not only a sannyasin, who had renounced everything and was very much immersed in non-duality with Brahman, highest samadhis and so forth. There was also a Nityasiddha, a perfected soul, according to his teacher, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And he was also a monk. So to hold a deity, what to speak of a goddess, as the highest refuge, probably points out the fact that we should maybe look into that and do the same. I remember a particular story where one of Sri Ramakrishna's devotees went to England, and of course the English were in India at the time, and causing different kinds of commotion there, you might say, to say the least. And so some of the Hindus were beginning to go to see the Queen, try and see the Queen in England and so forth. And so one of them came back from a journey to England, and Sri Ramakrishna asked, "What did you think about England and so forth?" And he said, "Oh, they were very rajasic. They were busy building ships and shipyards, big battleships." And he went on describing how they were such an active culture. And Sri Ramakrishna, instead of being critical or fault-finding or anything, said, "Well, it sounds like they're worshipping Shakti to me." So beyond the idea of birth and death, or creation and destruction, or what's good for me as an ego and what's good for my true self and all of that, is this high perspective of Advaita Vedanta, through which a great soul like that could proclaim something like that, even with all the questionable activities that were going on that might trespass against something so precious as ahimsa, nonviolence, which was always precious to the rishis of India. And one of the great axioms which they built their whole culture and their philosophies upon is this nonviolence, ahimsa. But at the same time be able to look at that and see that Divine Mother is working almost without any preference or without any sense of superior and inferior in everything. I'd say that probably if you wanted to look at her grossest form, it would be the power in atoms. And if you found the power in atoms and you were using the way the Western cultures are using it for power and pleasure, basically, if you want to just cut to the chase, then you'd say, well, they probably missed, her her herself as the mother of all these things. So when Sri Ramakrishna worshipped her, he was worshipping her as the foundation of all power and the realization of all peace, peace that passeth all understanding, as it was said in Jesus' time, or samadhi, as we call it in India, kind of overlooking that and just going for the externals of what Mother offers. And I think people, even if they're not interested in such fine particles like atomic particles and so forth, are doing the same thing when they covet objects and seek for pleasure with objects. They're overlooking Shakti, or divine power there, that is in not only in the atomic level of things, but in the atmic levels of things. One of the phrases that I put together, beyond atomic particles, there's atmic particles, and those would be particles of living intelligence, intelligence with a capital I, not to be confused just with intellect or intellectual pursuits, because she's definitely there in intellectual pursuits, say of the Western people, geniuses and discoverers and astronomers and so forth. But again, she's pointing the way towards, away from just external manifestations, toward the internal cause of things, and the cause of that cause, and the cause of that type. So you're finding it to her as, you might say, as the causeless cause, or the primordial cause. May she, the primal guide, my refuge be. It's back to Swami Vivekananda's declaration about her. She who since birth has ever led me on through paths of trouble to perfection's goal. He wrote one poem to Divine Mother about that. And of course, he had seen face to face Sri Sharda Devi. She usually veiled herself from the males and so forth. But maybe when she was in the village in Jairambati, and she went back to the village. But he came to know her directly and saw her as the divine consort of Sri Ramakrishna. And that's all very famous Leela of Ramakrishna in this age that we can look into by reading these wonderful testaments like the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and the Eternal Companion and the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. These are the kind of books and scriptures that we would like to be raised on, because Swami Vivekananda himself, his father and mother, raised him on a lot of the stories out of the Ramayana and Indian Itihasa, it's called, scriptural history. So all of that is a precursor to the fact that I came up with this phrase for a class, because at the beginning or the end of one year before the beginning of the next, we have to put together the schedule for SRV's activities. So I have to sit and think, what am I going to call those 4 retreats we do a year? And how am I going to title those several seminars we do a year? And how about the class series titles? That a lot of you are visiting. Thank you very much for doing so. Several thousand people looking on now to our YouTube classes, which this live streaming class will eventually become a YouTube class, maybe with a few small edits, like that cough I just had. We had one class recently where I must have coughed 12 or 16 times, tickle in my throat. Frog got in there, as they say. And so we had an interesting time trying to put that up on YouTube. But these live streaming classes will become YouTube classes for all of you to see. And I don't know how many there are. We have lost count. But this particular one, I came up with that phrase then, Kundalini Yoga as Mahayoga, because it's well known, and it's shown on the chart, which I will get to soon here, that you can consult the scriptures and the seers, which you very well should do, and you'll find out that a kind of high teaching that's also rare of mention is that if you look at ultimacy, if you look at these darshanas of India, so many of them, as we say, from Vedanta to Yoga and Buddhism and Samkhya and Shaivism and Shaktism and Vaishnavism and Jainism, and you go on counting these many, many great pathways to God that India has afforded us as seekers in this age. No such thing as a foreign religion, remember. All religion is indigenous to your soul. So this is all going on in the boundaryless level of her intelligence when she gets into minds which are more universal and which are more wide open, where she doesn't encounter blocks of the gross ego or beings attached to violence and trying to look for substance where there is none. Like Vedanta says, the real and the unreal. People are following the trail of the unreal all the time. So if you look at all those many darshanas, darshana is a word in Sanskrit that means to clearly see. So usually using darshan nowadays, unfortunately, kind of a limited way of going to see some person who's supposed to be very famous and, who gives an appearance in front of lots of people, maybe thousands of people. But darshana, really, that word means a philosophy or a clear way of seeing, some pathway that you find, like yoga and Vedanta and Buddhism and so forth, that allows you to, if you want to stay in keeping with what we're talking about in this today and the next several classes, with Divine Mother Power, how Shakti reveals herself as the author or authoress of all these various systems. These are her systems. She's the mother of the Vedanta. And her sons say the same in the Gita and in Shaiva scriptures and so forth. So as I looked upon the year, last year, one of the phrases I came up with, Kundalini Yoga is Mahayoga. So if you consult the scriptures and the seers, as I was saying, you'll find out that they have these, when they look at the utmost or the topmost echelon of everything, they have a way of explaining in two ways, two really well-defined pathways called Mahayoga and Abhava Yoga. Now, I've put that here on the chart, so it would probably be good before I start speaking extemporally about all these things, then we'd probably want to get right into this chart called Kundalini Yoga as Mahayoga. So I'll save the Kundalini portion for a few minutes here. Let's go right away to this two main divisions of yoga. Now, there's a quote there at the top we can take first. Shaktism and Shaivism, with Samkhya as cosmological basis, yoga as practice, and Vedanta as non-dual philosophy, is Mahayoga. So you see how it's taken a select 4 or 5 things, darshanas, out of the whole picture of India's wide open spectrum of great teachings and great pathways that are thousands of years old, many of them, and has selected, this quote has selected them, and so how powerful Mahayoga is. Now, we do have the 4 yogas Vivekananda has brought forward to us since the late 1800s, and one of his great discoveries is that the yoga of wisdom, Jnanam, the yoga of bhakti, devotion, and the yoga of meditation, Raja Yoga, which he wrote a commentary on, a very simple one for us, and then the yoga of action, selfless action, or karma yoga. Now, those 4 yogas, if you put them together, would also be a fourfold facet in the diamond of Mahayoga. So you can see how these great souls are beginning to make themselves well-rounded in all the yogas. Because Vivekananda had mentioned how boring it was to come across people who are only masters of one yoga, like someone who could really work altruistically only, and that was it. Or someone who was a very intellectual Jnani, you see, and was kind of dry, high-minded but dry, and didn't have any other complement to them. So he was saying 1 or 2-sided yogis, he would rather see his idea for the devotee of this coming age would be a well-rounded who had all 4 yogas. But so here we're following along that track when we study Mahayoga. And to repeat this, Shaktism, the worship of Divine Mother, put together with Shaivism, the worship of Lord Shiva, to destroy your ignorance, because Shiva is known for that. Samkhya as cosmological basis, with its 24 cosmic principles, if you didn't know Samkhya, you wouldn't understand that quote I started the class out with. All the tattvas would be as useless as clouds with no rain. And then people would saying, what are the tattvas? Well, people in the West, there's no word in English for tattva. We've been using principles, see, or stations of awareness. But they're not sentient in and of themselves, which is a great teaching. It means your ego is not a sentient principle that shines by its own light. It shines by some other light. And the objects and the senses that encounter the objects, quite often accost them, but encounter the objects, they too are useless without Mother Power, without knowledge of Divine Mother Power in them. Isn't it obvious? Because people aren't getting any satisfaction ultimately out of the objects. They can be stolen, you can become bored with them, they can break, they can get destroyed. They're breaking down all the time. They're ceasing to function. You can go on and on with a riot act list of problems with the objects that you're getting so attached to and holding on to your whole life out there, you see, in the world. So then all the tattvas, these are tattvas because consciousness is manning these stations. It mans the ego. It mans the twofold mind, you see, the dual mind. And it mans the intellect. So they would be useless without her. It would be like clouds with no rain. So you can see why they are useless to most people, or their use is only ending up in Lord Buddha's first noble truth. There is suffering. Whenever I leave my true nature, which is knowledge of Divine Mother Power, being her child like Sri Ramakrishna was, her son or her daughter, like Kanya Kali, daughter of Mother Kali, you see, name yourself well and you hold to a very high ideals. And so now you have all the tattvas with rain coming out of them, nurturing you see. So all of them are like the rishis in the Upanishads. Oh, the corn is conferring bliss upon us. Our children are conferring bliss upon us. Where's the mention of the world being problematic? Like in the Neti Neti paths, the rishis who gave us the Upanishads are talking about how much bliss is coming out of everything, see, because they knew about Divine Mother. Their rain clouds were full of rain all the time. So, a little bit of explanation about the Samkhya philosophy, 24 cosmic principles. It goes on to say yoga as practice. So, yoga is union, so we know that's like samadhi, the eighth limb of yoga. But it also has a practice through which you approach this highest philosophy. And this highest state of awareness. And then Vedanta is non-dual philosophy. So if you put that all together, which I just have for you verbally, then you can have a sort of description for Mahayoga. Now before we read the little list there, let's contrast it to Abhavayoga. As I've already had several students come up and say, what's Mahayoga, what's Abhavayoga? So it's just kind of a rare teaching. The four yogas are more common, although they've been pretty rare till just recently when Vivekananda brought them to us. We're beginning to think in terms of four different temperaments here among us, and four pathways we can walk and perfect ourselves in. So, but these two main divisions of yoga as reality are Abhavayoga and Mahayoga. Now, Bhava is probably the best. There are many meanings for that word in Sanskrit that you could use in English, but maybe the best one is moods or modes, you see, because bhavas are usually something that you have that gives you some sort of joy. They're inner experiences you have. So abhava would mean no joy, no moods. Doesn't sound very fun, does it? Well, it's not a fun path. It's a path of non-dual formless realization, which is not fun, it's bliss. Ananda would be its arrival point, and Ananda is a bliss that's unalloyed and uninterrupted. Sort of like, in the terms of peace, the peace that passeth all understanding. Then you shift from peace over to the idea of high states of awareness, and you've got this Abhavayoga, the yoga of formlessness. And we know that our great master, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and we were speaking this way on our drive over here to the Kedarnath Center this afternoon. We know that our great master was a person who preferred to have his bell fruit fully weighed. He used to use that story. Most people just discard the skin and the seeds and the stem and everything, just take the flesh, you see, and sell it at the market. So that would be, maybe you might say, the Advaitist, who just wants the essence of things. But he said, but I'm not like that. When I want to know God, I want to know it fully. So I'll weigh the whole fruit, stems, seed, core, skin, and all, along with the flesh. See, and that's how I will get the full weight of what God is. So he was a consummate knower of divine reality. You could probably say he also even wanted to know the Maya of Mahamaya. But he said from a distance. He was very wise in his rendering of how to stay clear of the problems of Maya. So you want to say you would study Maya from a distance to know what it's about. Why would you even want to do that? So you can help people lost in it. Why else? So anyway, here's some information that I've culled from scriptures and gurus, my gurus, and my own experience of 50 years meditating on it. But let's see what is listed about Abhavayoga here. Perception of reality with form, negation of the outer world, perception of God as voidness would be 3 points you could say about Abhavayoga, to try and confer somehow this idea of everything ending up in this full understanding that all is Brahman, because that is, after all, the moniker for Advaita Vedanta. You don't follow Advaita Vedanta and then everything becomes a void. See, it's a void that's full of potential. So that potential is realized in form, which is why you might want to take to Shaivism, for seeing how Lord Shiva works in the world, and Shaktism, seeing how Divine Mother works in the world, because they're there on the scene as the divine couple all the time. From age to age they appear to you as the divine couple. Whether it's Jesus and Mary from one standpoint, and from another it's Radha and Krishna, or Sita and Ram, or Muhammad and Fatima. I mean, you'll find these divine couples in every religion throughout the ages. Agastya and Lopamudra. I mean, there's these great divine couples that have been known through the ages, and that's really Shiva and Shakti's manifestation there, expressing through the divine human being. Otherwise, why bow down to avatars and rishis and seers and saints? There's that very formless essence running through all those forms. And those forms particularly, human forms, are the most divine, potentially. We're not seeing much of that in this age, but people have to realize that divinity, and then they will shine with this Swayam Jyoti, a light of their own doing, see, their own realization. Across the board then you'll see, but before we leave Abhavayoga, it got to where it was by negating the outer world. That's going to be either a splash of cold water in the face or a slap to the hand of any person who wants to try and attain Abhavayoga. Like in the Gita, Arjuna asks, who has the best path here? Those who worship form or those who try and realize the formless? And Krishna is a little bit non-committal in the way he answers that, but he says, all he really says, to be sure, is the path of those who follow Abhavayoga, formless, is very difficult. It's like a razor's edge path. It's like a steep cliff with very few fingernail holes, what to speak of toe holds. And so their path is much more difficult to follow. So I was saying again on the drive over here that we used to explain the difference between these kinds of paths via temperaments. If you have a particular temperament for God with form, then you're a devotee, you're a bhakta, You love the avatars when they appear. You have a guru that you worship, not that non-dualists don't. But generally speaking, you've got this side of things, and then on the other side, formlessness, you have this neti-neti path, you have this idea of shunyata in Buddhism, which is a kind of emptiness, and you're proceeding along this very steep path with no companion to speak of. Even Sri Ramakrishna said that path was very lightly traveled. You could hardly find beings following that path when you went that deep inside. We'll get to that when we talk about the chakras. When the higher awareness goes toward the chakras, the fewer people, fewer souls you will see. That's because of two reasons. Most people don't go there, and number two, those who do disappeared already. You see, into the crown chakra, into the 1,000-petaled lotus. You don't see them in form anymore, but they still exist. They didn't go into some strange emptiness that means that they're nil and void. It's just that they cannot be apprehended by the mind and senses anymore. And people aren't used to that. In fact, people aren't really used to things that can't be apprehended by the mind alone, like higher wisdom. They're used to what can be apprehended by the 5 physical senses. Again, we were talking today about the 5 pranas, how all the teachers out of the 60s who came to the West were teaching that the 7 chakras were in the body, and that it had something to do with hatha yoga and breathing exercises. And the Kundalini Yoga sort of got dimmed down and dumbed down as a precious darshana. I'll show you how we will resurrect that. It's the first book I wrote on that subject was called Reclaiming Kundalini Yoga, from that kind of thinking, reclaiming Kundalini Yoga. So we used to talk about it then in terms of temperament. Somebody prefer form and those who don't. And we kind of left it as to our understanding about that. But what I'm saying here now is that we can begin to think of it in terms of qualification. It's about time to do that. That people who, and as evinced by Krishna in the Gita talking about formlessness and Brahman, and the people who have, the rare people who reach that high state, and Ram in the Adhyatma Ramayana speaking in that way, and Sri Ramakrishna, of course, nowadays speaking in terms like that, and the Kundalini Yoga system itself, what to speak of the Asamprakyata Yoga of Patanjali, the father of yoga, all of them speaking in terms of this highest station of consciousness or awareness, which is its original essence. That all beings had to sort of come out of it, and when all things have had their play, they'll be soluble back into it. See, that's why we used to teach the kids about that very simply. Just drop a sugar cube in hot tea. You see, you can't drink it yet. You have to watch it for a while, and watch it break into quarters and then granules, and finally dissolve totally in this sweet cup of tea. There you've got, the soul and everything else becoming soluble into the indivisible liquid of Brahman. If all beings are coming out of that state into form through the word Om, and then playing for a while, and then returning, hopefully through one of those higher chakras, we'll speak about that in a bit again, then isn't Brahman the essence of everything, and shouldn't you be reaching it and having that experience? And why not try to do that in this very lifetime? And in fact, when you get a good guru, acharya, or teacher, or spiritual preceptor, they're kind of looking for students that have that kind of qualification, or at least interested in it. Because as Vivekananda said, the common run of beings who just get good at one yoga, ho-hum, you see, fine, good luck with that, you see, you've got your salvation. But where is the desire for complete liberation? Or you might put it in another way, where is the absence of fear that will cause you not to seek non-dual reality? And the doubt that precedes it. Fear and doubt. That you would doubt that there's an indivisible ocean of consciousness. That you would doubt that there's a Shakti power who causes things to come out of it and disappear back into it. These are eternal principles that India has been courting and is realized by many of its darshanas for countless ages. In fact, they know that ages go by in countless numbers. Yugas, Mahayogas, Manvantaras, much longer than the scientific idea of a mere 4 billion years. That this is constant cycles going on, and that that evolution is not the end of the story. That you evolve, everything evolves back like soluble into Brahman. All forms they will merge back into formlessness, like icebergs into oceans, Sri Ramakrishna said. And another ocean story he used was, imagine a huge, massive, burning, flaming planet coming out of the sky and plunking itself right down in the middle of the ocean. Imagine how much explosive power there is in that. And that's how he described the word. The word, which was kind of a matrix between this peaceful ocean of Brahman and this massive ocean of activity with its component of samsara, countless births and deaths and ignorance. Because there could be a salvation ocean where people are having, I'm having a very good lifetime here, thank you very much. No such thing as a bad hair day or disease in that heaven, in that loka, in that bardo, in that spanda. And just moving forward or inward to this immersion into formlessness. So all of that was, don't forget, negation of the outer world is one of the facets of Abhavayoga. And so you can see how Mahayoga must be a magnificent kind of yoga to include all the systems in it. A bare description there, and a bare description of the 4 yogas, to be able to be called superior to Abhavayoga. Mahayoga is given the highest footing, the highest estimation. It is the great yoga. It's the all-inclusiveness of everything. If you could take all the paths, what to speak of all the religions, that's become a little bit boring now too to us, and Ramakrishna has discovered. Okay, all the religions have the same essence. Got that, thank you. See, good reminder. But now let's take a look at this consummate integration and synthesis, the homogeneous nature of all pathways. And you might say somebody like Sri Ramakrishna meditating on this, that's where he came up with that saying, God is with form, God is beyond form, and God is beyond form and formlessness both. And it probably is not just the concept of form and formlessness he's talking about. That would be the philosophical definition of what that saying means. It's not just a philosophical, he means the actual experiential level of having knowledge of all these systems. And you can see I just put a few of them on this chart, which we'll look at. But let's look under Mahayoga then. Perception of reality as oneself. It's all contained within the Great Self. See? That's why Vivekananda is so important to us in this day and age, because you have high-minded philosophies, no doubt, but what about beyond mind philosophies? Not just high mind where you can still grasp something, but something that's gone beyond the ability to be grasped by any tattva, you see, especially if it doesn't have lots of rain in it. So the perception of reality is one's own self. Forget the self, he said, realize the great self. And some of the slokas of the Upanishads, we know, have that kind of teaching in them, Dharma teaching. Knowing reality in and beyond form. So it's not knowing reality in form, and then not knowing what's beyond form. And not just knowing what's beyond form because you skipped a lot of steps and rushed to it, but going back and then having to go back later and having to see, oh, I think all this is God. It's even there in a blade of grass. It's there in a microorganism. It's the same Atman in all worlds, untouched by growth, expansion, contraction, birth, death, higher, lower, existent and non-existent, true and false. And I somehow didn't get that when I jumped to Abhavayoga, so I probably should have kept in mind that, as Mahayoga has taught me by its great seers and its proponents and exponents and exemplars, knowing reality in and beyond form. That's why, again, beings like Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda are so important to us in this day and age for deeper, higher understanding. And then finally you get this component of blissful communion with God. Sri Ramakrishna is the greatest exemplar of that, because you have some very beautiful realized souls in contemporary times, the Ramana Maharshis and so forth. And no doubt they are probably having some sort of moods, Babas, inside of themselves, probably in their periods of sadhana, maybe in their periods of beyond sadhana where they didn't have to practice anymore. But there's been no one on record throughout the ages like Sri Ramakrishna. He's a copious map of all the samadhis. So we might as well call him the Mahayogi. There's just nowhere consciousness could go where he wouldn't find it. And of course, he knew in the end that it was all inside of himself, which is why perception of reality as one's own self, with a capital S, is so important. So this broad open-mindedness you see in him, no big thing. He used to be described by lovers of Sri Ramakrishna himself as a completely natural human being. What a human being should be. See, that's what we should be seeing out here in this time of stunted spiritual growth, Kali Yuga, veiled truth, false knowledge acting as true knowledge, lack of discrimination. See, no practice or sadhana going on in households. The rust of households, Buddha called it. Rust of monasteries is the lack of reciting scriptures. Rust of households, the lack of doing your spiritual practice every day. What is your spiritual practice? Devotion to the Lord, reading the scriptures, serving all as God, and meditating. 4 yogas. But do you want to add more in? Because then you're bridging on this topic of Mahayoga. And so this has all been kind of an introductory explanation and bridging the chart of why I came up with that title. Because now how to explain myself as far as specifically bringing out the facet of Kundalini Yoga. Kundalini Yoga as Mahayoga. It's going to be interesting to myself how I'm going to explain this. But I have thought about it. In fact, the last 2 mornings' meditations, my whole meditation has been on that. So here's what I think. Sri Ramakrishna said that when he had Kundalini awaken in him, that he saw a 20-year-old man that looked like himself going to each lotus, putting his tongue or his hand on it, and as he did so, each lotus blossomed and opened inwardly. You have to think of lotuses, Chakras they're called in this particular tradition, as vortexes of dynamic spiritual power, which Holy Mother, Divine Mother holds and has seership, overseership of. She's proprietress of all these worlds, lokas, inner worlds, and so forth. So he said, I envisioned myself, inside I saw a 20-year-old man who resembled me going, and each one of these chakras got opened by that kind of intimate contact with them. See, so this is how, in general, he explained the awakening of Kundalini Shakti. So I started thinking, when I was a 20-year-old man, I sat with my dear friend and Upaguru, you might say, Lex Hickson. I lived in New York for about 6 months or more, and went to his shrine along the Hudson River and sat there with him most mornings, sometimes on my own, and with other devotees around occasionally. But it was pretty much just come to New York and spend some time there and those are my earliest meditation experiences. I won't go into it in depth. So I was meditating with Lexington every morning, and we do this, and we chant slokas, and it was in the front of a shrine of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and the direct disciples were on the shrine. So here's what happened. When we were meditating, every 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, I forget how much, a train went by, rattling the whole house. You see, so he's in this big kind of empty mansion. Sri Ramakrishna said that the Sattvic devotees, you don't find much furniture in there, probably some cobwebs is what you'd find. And they just live very simply, wrapped around with their mosquito nets at night, not sleeping like everyone else, meditating inside the mosquito net. So that was kind of like what the Hickson house was at that time to me. And the living room had maybe one chair, maybe a throw rug, and a huge painting of Holy Mother that an artist had done, that I used to get, my brother and I, Steve Kindler, we used to get our violin and cello out and play for her at night because the crickets were going on. So we'd record this on the old cassettes. You see, I still have those old cassettes. And I remember we didn't know what to name that piece we played first. We called it the Cricket Concerto because all the crickets were in the background, and then we were playing. The crickets are going like this, and the violinist is going like this, and the cellist is going like this. So it's all about activity and friction. So very empty house, and then every morning and in the evening when we wanted to, sitting in meditation together. So here I was in my 20s doing this, and this train would go by every half hour or so. So the train station, I think it was called Riverdale, was right down there on the tracks, along the Hudson River. You could see the river from the big old house. And so I started thinking, that train goes to Grand Central Station every day, drops people off. And it probably stops, let's say for our own purposes here, it stops 6 times along the way, you see. So basically, people get on board that train in the morning, and they take off, and they're going to different locations along the way. And basically, if they want to go all the way to Grand Central Station, the train will take them right into the hub of things, where all the activity of human activity is going on, to go to their various workplaces and to affect their different desires and so forth. So I'm thinking, you see, basically that every lifetime you have to get on that train. Divine Mother Kundalini, when she awakens in poison. See, the poison of the Kali Yuga, the poison of humanity, the poison of the lowest chakra called Muladhara. Muladhara, see. And when she awakens there, she's primal power, see, associated with like root things, like earth, with the very creator himself, Lord Brahma, at the base of the spine. That is not the actual physical spine, but the physical spine represents the inner world that correlates with that. And it has 4 petals, 4 prana shaktis in it, 4 letters and 4 sounds, according to the Kundalini Yoga system. So, are you going to get on at the Riverdale station? And are you going to make the trip to Grand Central Station? Is this what I'm thinking about? That a lot of people never get on the train, so they don't ever awaken to the 7 chakras within them. And what to speak of getting to Grand Central Station, the Sahasrara chakra, like Sri Ramakrishna did, it doesn't happen for them. Thousands, millions of people never awaken to Kundalini Shakti. Now, what did Sri Ramakrishna say in the Gospel? He said, there can be no substantial spiritual growth at all without the awakening of Kundalini Shakti. Because in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you'll have him talking about subjects like Mahayoga. He talks about Narada's Bhakti Sutras, he talks about the 9 limbs of Bhakti, he talks about the 4 treasures of Vedanta, he talks about the 8 limbs of yoga, which is all on this chart and we can look at. But he's got this special relationship with Divine Mother, and her path is that Kundalini Yoga. Therefore, Kundalini Yoga as Mahayoga. without her awakening, there can be no spiritual advancement. So this is what I thought about when I remembered my early meditations in New York City, there in my early times with Lex Hickson, who is the founder of our SRV associations here. And those people who do get on the station, at the first station, and they're intending to move into the very hub of the highest activity, even beyond activity, called Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled or seventh chakra center. And they get on that train and they make the journey through the 6 stops. They'll arrive at the generative organs, the realm of all primal power, sexuality and so forth. Having families is a part of that. You see, trying to satisfy yourself physically is a part of that. It's the second chakra. You see, has to do. It's called Svadhisthana. Has to do with water. The god there is Varuna, and it's at the level of the generative organs. Again, don't take that literally as a physical location. These are all chakras, are all inner vortexes of power, all accompanied by millions of souls, see, who are revolving there in terms of the lower centers. And there's 6 letters there with 6 sounds and 6 prana shaktis. See, I'm kind of so we've departed on the Kundalini Yoga part of this chart now, so I'm beginning to teach it along with this very basic explanation of what the 7 chakras are in Kundalini Yoga. Lotuses, spandhas, vibrating spheres, internal worlds, kingdoms of heaven within you. You have to open your mind and think about internal verities. And probably the way most people can understand that is their dreams. They are actually going into inner worlds when you go into dreams. We've talked about that before. And deep sleep after that being the formless level of things. So your everyday life, 24-hour life, or your 80 to 100-year life is all about that kind of internal movement and coming back out and internal. Your breath is also like that. In breath, out breath, held breath. Everything you're doing has these cycles in it. There are prana shaktis, you see, these that are running the show here. You have to make them your friends. They say when in yoga, the first directive that they want beginners to do is realize the prana. If they can control the prana, then a lot of these other more dangerous, risky things like asana and pranayama aren't that necessary anymore. You use the mantra, and you use the scriptures, and the prana gets controlled by that. The mind controls the prana. Otherwise, you're coming from the bottom up and thinking that something else will control the prana. But the prana shaktis are offended by that idea. They're a part of her power. So they say, well, there's a better way to do this, you see. So this whole analogy I'm using then of the train ride from down the Hudson River up to New York City itself, right into the center at Grand Central Station. Some beings will get on that in a lifetime. How far will they go? What station will they get off at? How deep will they realize? Will they make it all the way into the city and realize the hub of all consciousness that is there? Or will they get off at certain stations and be limited to those stations and be reborn in those stations? Like Krishna saying in the Bhagavad Gita, the Tamasic people, they're born in dark wombs and they fall every lifetime. Sometimes into deeper, darker births still they'll fall. The Rajasic people are restless. They'll revolve in one area, you see. So they're born into restless wombs. People who are convinced that activity is the only thing to do. Sound familiar? Westerners, Americans, probably the whole world now, is the only thing to do is action. See, inaction is not thought of highly or at all, that you should sit still and be silent. Or maybe you should only do it a half hour or an hour a day and then call it meditation practice and go away and not realize who's running the show. Not what to speak of her sub-shaktis, you might call them. There's the great Mahashakti, who's, got all the Mahayoga and Kundalini Yoga. You might be saying, here's the path, waking up, get me out of the poison. See, because as soon as she wakes up at the base of the spine, she's thinking Lord Shiva. She's thinking Paramashiva. She's thinking seventh crown, the seventh chakra, crown. She wants to beat a hasty retreat from the poisons of the three lower worlds and get to these higher centers. And if you hold on to the hem of her garment successfully, she'll take you with her. And every breath should be taken with that desire to be with, holding on to the hem of her garment, or subjecting yourself to the descending arc of her wisdom sword that will cut away everything that's in the way of you having such high attainment, without all the fuss and muss that you're going through. The third station that this train ride we're taking here, is called Manipura. There, fire is the element. So you can see the five elements are being unwrapped here. They're the gross. We think of them as gross things: solid earth, liquid fire, liquid water, and fire, dynamic heat, and so forth, burning power. So these are elements that correspond to the first three levels or chakras. So there at the Manipura is this exchange of humans and ancestors. That's probably, babies are born in that physical location, and you feel the breath going in and out at the gut. You feel emotional insecurities and fulfillments there at the gut. You see the stomach, the navel they call it. So there at the navel is this hub of constant activity that's going on. Like I just mentioned from the Gita, born in restless wombs. Very difficult to transcend that third chakra. There's a Granthi right here, if you looked at a different chart, which we've looked at before, called Vishnu Granthi. It's very hard to penetrate. It's like a rubber cord that causes you to bounce back to the lower realms. Soul tries to come up against it if it has that kind of inspiration and enthusiasm to go with her. See, and she says, "Well, this is going to be hard to keep holding on to the garment of my skirt. We're about to go through this border. It's heavily guarded." See? And the soldiers there are not going to let just anyone go through. They'll have to pass and let me go through. They'll salute me. But you're going to have to try and hold on here and penetrate the Vishnu Granthi for them. It's a knot. And it's there to keep people who aren't worthy or not ready because of lack of love for God back down into the worlds. They love mammon, first and foremost, not the Lord. And it's obvious, and they have desires to fulfill at these three lower chakras. So if you want to reclaim Kundalini Yoga, then you're going to have to assess the levels of consciousness that are going on here, and the words. Here you see here, it's 10 sounds here, 10 letters. The idea is about bijams, seed words that can get you through the rubber guard, like that, you see. And the 10 prana shaktis that you'll befriend, to help you do that, see, her lesser powers. And this will afford you then the knowledge that you're about to transcend the need to be reborn again in the human form in ignorance. And so Kundalini Yoga begins to show itself up then as probably a prime facet, if not the pinnacle of Mahayoga. And Sri Ramakrishna would be that greatest exponent of it. Just read the Gospel of Ramakrishna. Like I say, he's talking about all these darshanas, but pay particular attention when he talks about Mother Kali and about Kundalini Yoga and how special a relationship he has with her and with her system. And that's why we want to make sure, if we reclaim it for America, for Europe, for this day and age, that we look at it the way Sri Ramakrishna looked at it, not the way some Hatha yogi looked at it, or somebody practicing some pranayama, or a scholar who studied the scriptures but didn't know anything about the mother of the scriptures. As we just chanted at the beginning of this at the beginning of this class, she's the meaning in all the multitudes of words. She's the secret in all the mantras. So you know the words and you know the mantras, but you don't know her? That's not going to get you very far. And so you'll find people, very astute intellectual people, coming against the Vishnu Granthi and being forced to be reborn on earth again. That's why you have so many scholars. That's why you have so many priests. And people in high places who have their gaze, like vultures, fixed on the carrion pit on the ground, even though they soar very high in the intellect. That's Sri Ramakrishna's description of those kinds of people who didn't know Mother. Sri Ramakrishna left school at an early age because he saw that the knowledge they were teaching in Calcutta, in India, in the schools at that time, were using Mother wisdom just to make a mere living. And that would have been fine if it says make a mere living dharmically, or make a mere living dharmically but keep your mind fixed upon her. If that had been added into the school systems, he would have been straight A student in every class at full attention, but not to cheapen her wisdom. What to speak of cheapen her, but even cheapen her wisdom. So that Aparavidya, the lower secular sciences, would then be taught as full of rain, you see. But they're not. They're dry, and they're not leading you to any deep realization of the reality as oneself, of God in and beyond everything, and of the ability to get bliss and commune with God, like Sri Ramakrishna was doing every day of his life. And when he wasn't doing it, he was very upset that he wasn't. In his sadhana period, he was rolling on the ground, throwing dirt on himself, watching the sun set and saying, another day has passed and I haven't realized you, O Mother. See? So then his intense yearning for her was the culmination when he finally realized her in the presence of a master teacher of Advaita, Sotapuri. He realized her, you see, and by then, and was beginning to merge aspects of Mahayoga already in his 30s. So let's say our train ride took us past the third stop. We somehow didn't get tossed off the train and do a face plant at that third station on the river, the Hudson River. You know, these rivers, you know, are called the Sushumna, the Ida, and the Pingala. That's the spinal structure. It's not the physical spine, but you can see this, these nadis. See, and again, what do we call them? Nerves? We immediately think of the body, right? So, yeah, how do we explain it in English? Let's look at a few of these notes I put here. You probably can't read them very well from a distance. I'll read them for you. The first one at the bottom, along the level there of the Manipura, is that each chakra has a certain number of petals that hold letters and bijams and their innate powers. You can think of the petals, how many petals, in this case 6 at the navel, as inner lands or inner realms. And They've even color-coded them conveniently for you nowadays. And they also have sounds associated with them, Sanskrit letters, which is why we chanted at the beginning of this class. She's the meaning in all the words. She's the secret in all the mantras. So these are her prana shaktis and so forth. So you can begin to make these connections, and some of this will start to mature in you, in your thinking process. And make sure you hold her along with that process. As we move up these 7 mentions here for 7 chakras, the next one is the chakras are vortexes of vital consciousness force called prana shakti. So this is a different kind of force than we're used to searching for in the outer world. Atomic force, kinetic force, electric force. We're all taken up with these outer signs of Mother's presence. But few of us are going in to find the source of this power. Like the source of the Big Bang, you might say. You'd go one step beyond that, you'd be in the next world. You'd be in the next chakra. And you'd have some corresponding insights and realizations to go along with that. And probably hold yourself there and not be born in that lower world anymore. You could be born in a more vital world, the world of the elementals, or the world of the ancestors, the heavens. Then you're holding yourself from falling back to earth so unscrupulously and so unceremoniously every lifetime, you see. Each chakra possesses a host of forces, prana shaktis, that work on its own specific plane. So each plane that you come to, each one of these chakras that you open up to on this inner train ride we're talking about, has finer and finer worlds and finer powers in it that work specifically on that world. And we've studied them before when we've looked at these four main aspects of Kundalini Shakti. A very good example out of the Kundalini tradition of how people come upon awareness of these different kinds of mother powers or prana shaktis. Mother as Kriyavati, mother as Varnamaya, mother as Kalatma, mother as Vedamayi. We'll look at that later. Let's go back here now that we've mentioned that each one of these works, these pranas, and work on their own plane. And this is why you have mantras with bijams in it. Say you were going from border to border and there was a password that you would let you by any border between two countries. It's just like that, only inwardly. If you have a mother mantra with a bijam in it, you can say that to the guardians at the gate, maybe a nice way of putting it, that they'll stand by and let you pass. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, had access to the highest chakra in Nirvikalpa. Vivekananda too had Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So you have to look at them as beings who had understood the power, the mother power in words, in bijams. Not just for making a living, because they didn't work in occupations. Their occupation was enlightenment and how to get you enlightened. So they're key words which will open up, and if you practice them, you're attracting these powers to you. They're inside of you after all, because Advaita Vedanta, has its deep connection with both Abhavayoga and Mahayoga. You can't leave Advaita Vedanta out of any quotient for realization or enlightenment. The next bullet point here is nadis, and this is where I was picking it up, is because remember there's the Sushumna, which is the central channel, then there's the Ida and the Pingala. So those are the 3 tributaries or inner rivers which carry you toward the source. And they're all conducting Shakti force at grosser, finer, and very refined levels of your awareness. This is how the system of Kundalini Yoga is trying to propose it to you. That's why it's a very special and rare set of teachings you'll get from it. And people were very much attracted to it in the 60s and 70s. And it got its time in the eye of America particularly, and a little bit in Europe. And but then we had to fall back and regroup, read about Sri Ramakrishna's life, understand Swami Vivekananda's visit to our shores, and come back again with fresher realization about just how powerful that teaching was and who the Divine Mother was. So that's an important point there. Nadis are not physical nerves, but yoga nadis that cannot be detected by the eye. You'd have to say that to someone who's intellectual but has no idea about inner worlds. They're completely conducting everything on the premise that the outer worlds are real alone, that the physical is all there is, that I am the body. And they don't even know that I'm not the ego because they don't know about their ego yet. It's bantered about, oh, you have a big ego, or, you know, he has no ego at all. You know, there's nothing about ego being a tattva. Thank you. A tattva. It's actually a station that consciousness mans. And without her, it has no rain. It's a cloud with no rain. So none of the teachings here are going to make any sense to a very high intellectual person who has only taken up the secular sciences, and probably only one of them, because the scientist will not consult the psychologist. The psychologist will not consult the guru. The medical profession will not consult the metaphysicians. Everywhere you go, it's just like, it's like the Vishnu Granthi has a bunch of tendrils, you see, that it threw down 3 chakras. And people are bumping up against them even in this world. And nobody can go anywhere and do anything of any substance, you see, of any merit. Everything's against you the minute you start out to try and unify things. But unity is here, you see. It's already getting unified here. And you're beginning to suspect that it's unified here. And you're loving unity here. It's an ideal, you see. So as you're coursing inward and upward, inward ascension I used to call it, back when I was that 20-year-old man, wrote a piece of music called Inward Ascension on the guitars and cello. And I can play it for you sometime. It's not on any of the albums, I don't think, the mini Jaima music albums. But later on we added sitar and sarod to it, and tablas, and it became an east-west amalgam of music that had to do with inward ascension, of penetrating through these tendrils all the way to the root granthi, spiritual knot. You know, how can you explain that in English? A spiritual knot. What do you mean a spiritual knot? Probably the most obvious spiritual knot that we could think about here is how the religions can't get along with each other. If the countries can't get along with each other, what can we do? The politician in the state that it's in, politics and everything. But the religion should be able to transcend those differences, and see that God is the eternal subject, and give up the infernal object and take on the eternal subject, and then begin to go inward and agree, you see, so that the mind could get beyond the world. And this is what you're talking about here. The mind is getting beyond itself. It's getting beyond the ego, it's getting beyond the intellect, and it's getting beyond coarse thought, gross thought, you know, rounds of thought that are mundane, that are quotidian, you see, ways of thinking. I like that word. Not used much anymore. So remember, the nadis are not physical nerves. Don't dumb it down to that. They're yoga nadis. And that Hudson River that we're taking the train ride up is an outer symbol of a huge river that's flowing inwardly called the Shumna, that goes straight to the source. And if you're male or female, or if you're running hot or cold, or if you're doing it at daytime or at nighttime, you're taking the Ida or the Pingala up and down. The path of the dark, the path of the light, Krishna calls them in the Gita. Then you're coursing along these three most primal rivers to the remotest retreat spot possible. You're taking the inner retreat, of which these outer retreats we're taking are just a mere hearsay, you say, getting us ready to actually embark on a journey like that. Qualifying ourselves by Abhavayoga to reach Mahayoga, if you want to call it that. Well, everything starts to get good on the train ride. You would say that if you stopped, when you got on the train at the Muladhara Chakra when you woke up one morning, you said, I think I'm going to take the spiritual trip now. You woke up in poison. You woke up saying, I don't like this world with its violence, with its diseases, with its dishonesty, with its fair faces and false hearts, with its chicanery above and its blackguardism behind, quoting Vivekananda about the world. See? I don't like this, so I think I'm going to get on this train and I'm going to make for better climbs. You see? Be a hasty retreat. I will renounce the world now. See? Isn't it? Negation of the outer world. You're qualifying yourself to be an Abhava yogi. Forget Mahayoga for now. That's too mind-blowing for anyone. You're going to have to really pace yourself, expand yourself to arrive at a position that a Vivekananda, a Sri Sharda Devi, or a Sri Ramakrishna arrived at and lived at most of their life and lifetimes previous. So then you're saying, well, scenery's not very good here along this part of the river. There's pollution, there's deforestation, there's runoff from cities, there's sewage. That's the Muladhara Chakra station. See, I got off on. So now I'm getting to the Svadhisthana station. Shall I get off there? Yeah. The air doesn't smell very good. People are walking around in a daze. They want me for sex or something, you see. They want to use me for this and that, you see. They're attracted only to my body. And so I'm at the level of the primal force of base sexuality, see. And everyone's concerned about gender. See. We're talking about that on the way over in the car today. So if you think about Divine Mother, maybe might not be best to think about her as a feminine force necessarily, because she's beyond feminine and masculine. You're not going to turn her into a woman or into a four-armed goddess necessarily. Maybe along the way you'll see her as that, but you're going to have to see her as an essence. She's the essence of non-duality. She's the meaning in words. She's the secret of mantras. She's the whole meaning of slokas and sutras in the scriptures. So, where's she hiding all this time? Where have you been? You see. May she, the primal guide, my refuge be. So I'm looking for a different refuge when I get beyond the Svadhisthana into the Manipura. Now here things get to be a little more interesting, but you still have this sense of lack of love for God, for divine reality. People still are very much into my next birth, whether they know it or not. People are dying, and they think that their death is real. And so they're creating a subtle body for themselves in their next lifetime. If you wanted to go to the Mahayoga system and look into one of its facets called Buddhism, then you'd see that in some, links, some 9 links or so, nidanas they're called, people are preparing themselves through conditioning, through thirst for things, for desire, trishna, and so forth, and all of these experiences that they're having with the senses, they're just routing themselves into a chain link. It's a chain link fence they're building around themselves. And Lord Buddha wanted to break that. See? Wanted to break your connection with the realm of the ancestors. There are different ways of doing that. If you're doing it through Abhavayoga, then you're looking for a chain cutter. You might get off at the Manipur station and go straight to the hardware store. I saw the chain of Nidanas in my dream last night along the train, you see. I need a chain cutter now. You see. Or if you're going Mahayoga, you're going to say, I love my ancestors. You see. I'm going to love them away. I'm going to love them so much they quit bothering me. And so you're taking this different pathway, you see, depending there on temperament. So whatever the case may be then, you're getting beyond the Manipura chakra, which is known there at the, it's where food is digested and water is taken in, the fetus is formed, where your emotions are seated. There's so many things that have to do with the gut there, even on the physical level, which we're not restricting this to, remember. But as this Sushumna opens up to it and the soul is coursing inwards to it, which you will do at death if you're not going to do in meditation or in deep sleep tonight, then you will see these worlds efflorescing with all their petals. How many here? 10. How many pranashaktis? 10. How many sounds, inner sounds will you hear? 10. That's the Manipura chakra. And you want to know those, to have acquainted yourself with them in the mantra that your guru gave you at the time of initiation back on earth. See? Now this becomes a little bit too little too late, they say, but now this will become important to you. But you should make it very important as quick as you can in this lifetime. Because the next time you get on that train, in the next lifetime, you'll find most people aren't on it, but you may get on the train at the third station. Or hopefully beyond. Let's look at beyond. Well, there's Anahata. See, the Anahata chakra. That's really a word for the word. It's a word for the word, Om. Omkara, the cause of all things. Anahata, Pranava, Shabda. There's so many words for that primal word. And if you have been so graced and so strong and resilient as to hold on to the hem of Mother's garment, Kundalini Mother, as she's making her ascent to meet her Lord, because she wants to get there as quick as possible. She doesn't like being born in poison. Neither do you. We hope. I mean, there is the pigs in filth syndrome. If you've seen pigs before, you know that that exists, and some humans are really wallowing in the filth of the 3 lower chakras, even just the lowest chakra. But if she wants to penetrate and you've had the strength and wherewithal to go with her consciously in the aspirations of your life, then this is the station where everything is beautiful. You leave all pollutions behind. And the beings there shine. They're called devas, devis. That, in English, that means the shining ones. They call the gods and goddesses in the scriptures the shining ones. And they will come forward to you as if in congratulations, you see, and say, guess where you are now? You've made the 4th station of this train ride, this inner trip up the Sushumna. And please get off here. You won't just be enjoying yourself with suffering like was there in the first 3 chakras. You'll be enjoying yourself with exquisite enjoyment. This is where God will appear to you. And how many sounds are there? 12. Om is rendering forth all sorts of beautiful sounds. In these realms, it's not just sight that makes you pleased, it's sound. Probably you would understand that if you really loved music in this lifetime. And especially music with some substance. Because of course music is of all different grades and qualities. But if you had appreciated divine sound, or sound that was associated with Mother, which was offered to God, then this realm will attract you through the ear, anahata. The word will attract you. So you get there and you find out 12 letters, 12 sounds, 12 prana shaktis are there at the Anahata chakra, the heart. You have penetrated through a great rubber cord here that sends most other beings shooting back to their various darkened wombs or restless wombs or wombs of reincarnation. So air, it's interesting, the earth, water, fire, but when you get to the heart chakra, it's air, it's atmosphere, it's ether, almost. Ether is to come, but it's this wide open space beyond all religion. And you can breathe, you can really breathe there. Have you ever noticed that in your life that some breaths are very satisfying and others aren't? You come upon that? You say, I can't quite get enough air today. I'm not getting that full breath of air that makes me feel satisfied. And then a couple hours later, it's, there it is. So air itself has a very powerful inward quality. Remember, the prana shaktis are in charge of this air and this fire. So you're not just attracted to earth as, metals and woods and resources you can get for yourself greedily, or to water that can satisfy yourself in various alcoholic drinks, liquids and so forth, or fire, which burns your house down as well as cooks your food. So it's an inner form of earth, water, fire. And the poison is being taken out of it as you follow her inward. And so Isha, the chosen one, anyone's chosen one. If you love Jesus, you'd see Jesus here. If you love Krishna, you'd see Krishna here. If you love Buddha, you'd see Buddha here, in that form that is most pleasant to you and most inspiring. Isha is there, multi-faced if you want. So that's at the heart, and that's where we're getting off for the break. We're going to come back and finish up this chart of the 3 higher chakras and refer back to the Abhava and Mahayoga systems and flesh this out, as they say, as it is the precious mystical system of Mother India, Kundalini Yoga, the way I'm presenting it, with its connection to Abhavayoga and to Mahayoga, the great all-inclusive yoga. So here, let us take our break.